It wasn't just the cold that tried to kill her. It was the silence. The way Redemption Creek turned its back. The way God's so-called men shut their doors and let a pregnant girl bleed into the snow. She didn't come looking for charity, just a place to have her baby in peace. Instead, she found judgment dressed in black robes and silver spurs. They left her to freeze like a strayed dog. But the plains weren't done with her. Neither was fate. What they didn't count on was a Lakota chief riding through a white hell with honor in his heart and fire in his soul. He didn't see a fallen woman. He saw life, and he claimed her as his own. Out here, mercy don't wear a preacher's collar. It rides bareback into the storm and dares the wind to blow harder. What do you think? Does a woman like Marin deserve redemption from strangers when her own people cast her out? Would you have turned her away or stood with her in the storm? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd ride through a blizzard to read every word. The wind, a restless spirit across the high plains, whispered Marin's name as she stepped down from the stagecoach. The dust of a long journey settling on her worn calico dress. Redemption Creek. The name itself felt like a prayer, a promise of solace she desperately needed. Her hand instinctively went to the gentle swell of her belly, a silent testament to a love betrayed and a future uncertain. This place, nestled in the shadow of the stark, unforgiving mountains, was to be her sanctuary, the quiet haven where she would bring her child into the world, far from the judgment and the shame. Jedediah Stone. His name was a brand on her heart, a name synonymous with wealth that stretched across acres of prime ranch land, and a coldness that had chilled her to the bone. He was the father of her child, a truth he'd denied with the swift, brutal efficiency of a man swatting a troublesome fly. Reputation, he'd spat, was a fragile thing in these parts, more precious than the gold some still scrabbled for in the dwindling streams. A child born out of wedlock to a woman of no standing. Unthinkable, his words, sharp as newly forged steel, still echoed in the hollow chambers of her memory. Redemption Creek, she soon discovered, wore its piety like a freshly starched collar. Stiff, gleaming white on the surface, yet constricting the very breath of compassion. The town's moral compass was Preacher Thorne, a man whose voice boomed from the pulpit of the stark white church, his words painting sin in vivid, terrifying hues. Marin, a woman alone and visibly with child, became his unspoken sermon, a living embodiment of the fall from grace. He never named her, not directly, but his pronouncements on fallen women and the wages of sin hung heavy in the air, each syllable a stone cast in her direction. The townsfolk, their faces grim and shuttered, took their cue. Eyes slid away from hers in the mercantile. Doors that might have offered employment remained firmly closed. Mrs. Henderson, the proprietor of the boarding house where Marin had found a small, clean room, had at first seemed kind, her eyes holding a flicker of sympathy. But the pressure, insidious and unyielding, had mounted. "It's the talk, dearie," she'd said one evening, her voice barely a whisper, her gaze fixed on the worn floorboards. "The preacher and others, they say it ain't fittin'." And so, Marin found herself out on the street, the few coins she possessed dwindling with alarming speed. Her only refuge was a derelict line shack, a forgotten relic on the outskirts of town, its timbers groaning under the weight of neglect. The wind whistled through the chinks in the walls, a mournful song of her desolation. Winter was closing in, the days growing shorter, the air biting with a cruel promise of the blizzards to come. Here, utterly alone, Marin fought against the encroaching despair, the memory of her own parents, who had cast her adrift in a different, though no less cruel, manner when she was but a girl, haunted her waking hours. Their stern faces, the constant admonishments, the feeling of never quite measuring up. It all came flooding back, a bitter tide. She wouldn't be like them. Her child, this precious, innocent life within her, would know only love, only devotion. That vow became her shield against the cold. Both outside and within, Widow Gable, a woman whose face was a roadmap of sorrow and resilience, watched Marin from the window of her small, neat cottage on the edge of town. She'd lost her own husband to a fever years ago, and her only son to the lure of the goldfields, never to return. There was a kinship she felt with the young, pregnant woman, a silent understanding of what it meant to be alone in a harsh world. Many a time, she'd felt the urge to reach out, to offer a warm meal, a kind word, but fear, cold and sharp, stayed her hand. Preacher Thorne's influence was far-reaching, and Jedediah Stone's shadow loomed even larger. To associate with the outcast was to invite scorn, perhaps even ruin, upon oneself. So, Widow Gable watched, her heart aching, a silent prayer on her lips, a pot of stew simmering on her stove that Marin would never taste. One particularly biting afternoon, as the sky spat the first angry flurries of snow, 2 riders appeared at Marin's dilapidated sanctuary. They were Stone's men, their faces hard, their eyes empty of pity. They didn't dismount, their horses stamping restlessly, their breath pluming in the frigid air. "Mr. Stone sends a message," one of them called out, his voice rough as granite. "He says this ain't no place for you. Best be gone before the snow flies proper. Wouldn't want you to get trapped." The unspoken threat hung heavy between them. Trapped, left to the mercy of the elements. A death sentence delivered with chilling nonchalance. Then, with a vicious kick, one of them sent a supporting beam of the lean-to crashing to the ground. The fragile structure shuddered. "Consider it a warning." The other man grunted, before they wheeled their horses and galloped away, leaving Marin standing amidst the splintered wood, the wind tearing at her thin shawl. The blizzard arrived not as a gentle blanket, but as a ravenous white wolf, howling and clawing at the world. It devoured the landscape, erasing landmarks, transforming the familiar into a treacherous, alien terrain. Inside the shack, the wind shrieked through the ever-widening gaps, snow piling in drifts against the flimsy door. Marin huddled beneath a threadbare blanket, the cold seeping into her bones. And then, the first pain, sharp and undeniable, tore through her. Her time was upon her. Panic, cold and stark, warred with a primal instinct to survive, to protect her child. Redemption Creek. There was no other choice. She had to reach the town, to find help, any help. Wrapping herself as best she could, she pushed open the groaning door and stepped out into the teeth of the storm. Each step was an agony. The wind buffeted her, stealing her breath, the snow blinding her, freezing on her lashes. The pains came harder now, closer together. She stumbled, fell, rose again, driven by a force stronger than herself. The lights of Redemption Creek, faint and blurred through the swirling snow, were a distant, almost unattainable promise. She remembered her mother's face, not stern as it usually was in her recollections, but softened by a rare smile as she'd once mended a doll for Marin, a fleeting warmth. quickly extinguished by the biting reality of the storm. Then, her father, his back always turned, a figure of silent disapproval. She would not be them. She would not abandon her child. Finally, her breath ragged, her body screaming in protest, she reached the livery stable on the edge of town. Its solid walls offered a momentary respite from the storm's fury. Light spilled from a lantern hanging inside, illuminating the figures of two men, Jedediah Stone and Preacher Thorne. They were seeking shelter from the storm, their voices low and serious as they discussed some matter of town business. Hope, fragile as a newborn bird, fluttered in Marin's chest. "Please," she gasped, her voice hoarse, barely audible above the wind's roar. "Help me. The baby. It's coming." Stone turned, his handsome face hardening into a mask of cold fury when he saw her. Thorne's expression was one of stern disapproval, his lips tightening into a thin, unforgiving line. "What is the meaning of this, woman?" Thorne demanded, his voice resonating with righteous indignation. "Have you no shame, appearing in such a state?" "Jedediah," Marin pleaded, her eyes fixed on the father of her child, ignoring the preacher. "Please, for our baby." Stone's jaw clenched. "I told you to be gone," he said, his voice low and venomous. "This town wants nothing to do with your kind, and that thing is no concern of mine." He gestured vaguely towards her swollen belly, his disgust palpable, but the storm. "I'll die out there," she whispered, the last vestiges of her strength draining away. "Perhaps that would be for the best," Preacher Thorne intoned, his eyes cold as the winter sky. A cleansing of sin, the cruelty of their words, more brutal than the blizzard itself, struck Marin with the force of a physical blow. She looked from Stone's implacable face to Thorne's pious disdain, and something within her shattered. There was no redemption here, no mercy, only the hollow hypocrisy of men who cloaked their own darkness in robes of self-righteousness. With a strength born of utter despair, Marin drew herself up. She said nothing. There were no words left. She simply turned her back on them, on Redemption Creek, and walked back into the raging heart of the storm. The wind tore at her. The snow enveloped her like a shroud. She stumbled onward, away from the false promise of salvation, each step a farewell. Then, her legs gave way. She sank to her knees in a deep drift. The cold, a welcome numbness seeping through her. She curled herself around her belly, a final, futile gesture of protection. The howling of the wind became a lullaby, the swirling snow a soft, white blanket. Peace, of a sort, settled over her. She closed her eyes. The image of a tiny, perfect hand, a hand she would never hold, lingering in her fading consciousness. The storm raged on, indifferent, magnificent in its merciless power. As the darkness closed in, just as the last flicker of consciousness threatened to extinguish, a shape loomed through the white curtain of the storm. Then another, and another, not the jagged peaks of the mountains she'd imagined as her tombstone, but figures on horseback, dark against the blinding snow. They were a hunting party, Lakota men, their faces weathered by wind and wisdom, their movements economical and sure even in the teeth of the gale. Leading them was Tatmaska, their chief, a man whose presence commanded respect without a word. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's despite the swirling snow, missed nothing. It was Chiton, a younger warrior with keen sight, who first spotted the dark bundle nearly consumed by a drift. He called out, his voice carrying over the storm's howl, Tafmaska reined in his sturdy pony, the animal snorting plumes of frosted breath. He dismounted, sinking to his knees beside Marin. Gently, he brushed the snow from her face. Her skin was ashen, her lips tinged with blue, but a faint breath, a mere whisper of life, still escaped them. His gaze fell to the unmistakable swell of her belly beneath the snow-caked rags. Petiviyan, he murmured, the Lakota words for buffalo woman, a term of reverence for a woman carrying new life, a sacred vessel of the people's future. He looked up at his men, their faces stoic but questioning. She is with child, Tahamaska stated, his voice calm but firm. The great mystery has led us to her. A murmur rippled through the small group. Tushangjika, a warrior known for his quick temper and suspicion of outsiders, spoke first. She is Vashichu, chief, a white woman. Her people cast her out. Why should this be our concern? The storm is fierce. Our own families await our return to the winter camp. Tahamaska's gaze, steady and profound, met Tushangikas. Does the snow fall only on the Lakota? Does the winter wind bite only our skin? She carries life. It is Wakantanka's will that we found her. It is our sacred duty to protect that life, regardless of the color of her skin or the tongue she speaks. He turned back to Marin. We will take her with us. There was no room for argument in his tone. Carefully, as if handling the most delicate treasure, Tahamaska and another warrior lifted Marin's unconscious form. They wrapped her in a thick buffalo robe, securing her onto a travois that one of the ponies pulled. The journey back to the hidden winter camp was arduous, the storm relentless, but the Lakota moved with a grim determination, their knowledge of the land innate. Marin, suspended between life and death, was only vaguely aware of movement, of muffled voices, of a pervasive, biting cold that seemed to have settled deep within her soul. Then, a change. The howl of the wind softened, replaced by the scent of wood smoke and roasting meat, the murmur of many voices, the barking of dogs. She felt herself being lifted, carried into a space that was blessedly warm. Light, dim and flickering, danced behind her eyelids. She awoke on a soft bed of furs inside a spacious teepee. The air was rich with the scent of herbs and smoke. An older woman with kind, knowing eyes and hands as gnarled as ancient tree roots was tending to her. This was Chapoy, the tribe's healer, her presence a balm to Marin's frayed spirit. Other women moved quietly, offering sips of warm broth, adjusting the furs around her. The pains, which had subsided into a dull ache during her ordeal in the snow, returned with renewed ferocity. But here, there was no judgment, no scorn, only gentle hands, soothing voices, and an ancient wisdom that guided her through the terrifying, magnificent process of birth. Chapoy chanted softly, her voice a rhythmic anchor in the storm of Marin's labor, while the other women offered encouragement and practical help. As the first rays of a weak dawn filtered through the smoke hole of the teepees, Marin's son drew his first breath, his cry surprisingly robust, a wave of profound relief, so potent it bordered on pain, washed over Marin. She had done it. They had survived. Chapoy cleaned the infant and laid him in Marin's arms. He was perfect, his tiny face serene, his small hand instinctively curling around her fingers. Tears streamed down Marin's face. Tears not of sorrow, but of an overwhelming, almost unbearable joy and gratitude. The boy was named Chaitan, in honor of the sharp-eyed warrior who had first spied Marin in the snow. It was a strong name, meaning falcon. Later, When Marin had regained some strength, Tahmaska came to her tipi. He sat quietly for a moment, his gaze resting on her and the sleeping infant. "The child is strong," he said, his voice gentle. "He has a powerful spirit to have endured such a journey before his birth." He looked at Marin, his eyes holding a deep respect. "You, too, have shown a spirit that does not easily break. The grandmothers have spoken. You will have a Lakota name, so that you may truly be one of us. Should you choose to stay, you will be called Wingyang Thawakoni, woman who survives. It speaks of your resilience, your spirit's sacred power. Wingyang Thawakoni, woman who survives." The name settled into her heart, a comforting warmth, a testament to a strength she hadn't known she possessed. For the first time in her life, Marin felt seen, truly seen, not as a fallen woman or a burden, but as a person of worth, a survivor deserving of honor. Her journey of integration began slowly, like the first tender shoots of spring grass after a long winter. She learned the soft, flowing cadences of the Lakota language, the names of the plants Chapoa used for healing, the way to prepare hides, the stories the elders told around the fire. She watched the children, their laughter unfettered, their place in the community secure and cherished. She saw the intricate web of relationships that bound the people to each other and to the land, a philosophy of interconnectedness that was a world away from the grasping individualism of Redemption Creek. The earth was their mother, the sky their father, the animals their brothers. Every sunrise was a prayer, every hunt a sacred exchange. One cool evening, as the stars blazed with an icy brilliance in the clear prairie sky, Chapoy led Marin to the river that flowed near the camp. An older woman, one of the tribe's respected spiritual leaders, joined them. They built a small fire, and the older woman began to chant, her voice weaving a tapestry of ancient words. Chapoy gently explained that this was a ceremony of cleansing, of releasing the past so that Wingyang Thawakoni could fully embrace her new life. They bathed Marin in the smoke of sacred herbs, sage, sweetgrass, and cedar, its pungent aroma filling her senses. Then she was guided into the frigid water of the river, the shock of it stealing her breath. As she emerged, shivering but feeling strangely lighter, the old woman wrapped her in a warm, dry robe. "The water has carried away your old sorrows," Chapoy said softly. "You are reborn with the Pitai Oyatas, the buffalo people." And Marin felt it, a shedding of an immense burden. The pain of Jedediah's betrayal, the sting of Redemption Creek's cruelty, even the lingering shadows of her own childhood, all washed away, leaving behind a clean, quiet space within her. Not everyone accepted her presence without question. Tusha Anjika, the warrior who had initially objected to her rescue, remained wary. His gaze would often follow her, a hint of suspicion in his eyes. He saw her as an outsider, a potential source of trouble. "She learns our ways too quickly," he grumbled to some of the other young men one day, loud enough for Marin to overhear as she mended a moccasin near her teepee. Her heart is still Vashichu, Tahmaska, who seemed to possess an uncanny awareness of everything that transpired in the camp, appeared beside them. "Her heart is that of a mother who fought for her child," he said, his voice even, but carrying an unmistakable authority. "Her spirit is that of Wingyang Thawakoni. She has earned her place among us. If Wakantanka did not wish her here, the storm would have claimed her. Do you question the great mystery?" Tushangjeka. The warrior flushed and fell silent, though his resentment still simmered. Marin, for her part, Focused on learning and contributing, she had brought a small, battered leather satchel with her, containing a few personal belongings and, surprisingly, a small collection of medicinal powders and tinctures her grandmother, an eccentric woman with a knowledge of old-world remedies, had taught her to use. One day, seeing Chapoy struggle with a persistent fever in one of the children, Marin hesitantly offered a small pouch of willow bark powder. "My grandmother used this for fevers," she explained in her improving Lakota. "It eases the heat." Chapoy, ever open to new knowledge, examined the powder, smelled it, and listened intently as Marin explained how to prepare it. To Marin's relief and Chapoy's quiet satisfaction, the child's fever began to subside after a dose of the willow bark infusion. It was a small thing, but it forged a new bond of respect between the two women, a quiet exchange of knowledge that transcended cultural boundaries. Marin realized she had something to offer, that her past, even the parts tied to the white world, held value. As the days lengthened and the first signs of spring began to touch the land, Marin found herself watching Tahamaska more often. He was a leader not through force, but through wisdom, courage, and a profound compassion that extended to all living things. She saw the way his people looked to him, the trust in their eyes. She noticed the quiet moments when his gaze would meet hers across the bustling camp. A flicker of understanding, perhaps even a hint of something deeper, passing between them. He never spoke of it, nor did she, but his presence was a steady anchor in her new life. He would often stop by her teepee to inquire after her and Chaitans, his deep voice a comforting rumble. Sometimes, he would simply sit with the baby, a look of gentle contemplation on his strong features. In those moments, Marin felt a sense of safety and belonging she had never known, a fragile bud of hope for a future she hadn't dared to dream of. This was not the fire of her youthful infatuation with Jedediah, but something quieter, deeper, rooted in shared hardship and mutual respect, as profound and enduring as the ancient plains themselves. The tentative peace Marin had found was as fragile as a butterfly's wing, as ephemeral as the morning mist that clung to the riverbanks before the sun burned it away. Spring had indeed breathed new life into the prairie, painting the landscape in soft hues of green and gold, a stark contrast to the winter's harsh monochrome. Chaitan, her little falcon, thrived under the watchful eyes of the Lakota women, his laughter a bright, untarnished sound in a world that had shown his mother so much cruelty. Wingyang Thawakoni, she whispered the name to herself sometimes, testing its weight, its truth. Here, among the Pitwoyate, the buffalo people, she was beginning to feel the resilience it signified, a strength nurtured by acceptance and respect. But the shadow of Redemption Creek, long and chilling, was destined to fall upon this nascent tranquility. News, carried on the restless breath of the prairie wind, found its way back to the settlement. Silas, the fur trapper, a man whose commerce knew no firm allegiances beyond the gleam of coin or the promise of a whiskey, let slip his observations in the smoky confines of Redemption Creek's only saloon. He spoke of a white woman dwelling among Tahamaska's band, a newborn babe at her breast, a woman whose description hauntingly matched that of Marin, the outcast, the one presumed lost to the winter's fury. The words, when they reached Jedediah Stone, landed not with the gentle balm of guilt assuaged, but with the sharp, cold impact of a viper's strike. He was in his opulent study, the scent of expensive leather and imported tobacco heavy in the air, a testament to the empire he had so meticulously constructed. This news was a fissure in that foundation. It wasn't merely the social embarrassment, the snickering whispers that would undoubtedly follow. It was the child, his child, a living, breathing complication, a complication now fostered by the Lakota, a people whose ancestral lands bordered his own vast holdings, lands acquired through treaties that bent more than they bargained, a son bearing his blood, even if unacknowledged. Among them, it was a potential claim, a tangible link he could ill afford, the ghost of past injustices, of deals perhaps not as ironclad as his lawyers professed, rose to haunt him. Across town, in the stark, vaulted space of the Redemption Creek Community Church, Preacher Thorne received the tidings. His reaction was a tempest of righteous fury. He saw Marin's survival not as a miracle of providence, but as a defiant act, a perverse mockery of the divine judgment he had so confidently implied. That Sunday, his sermon was a masterpiece of fire and brimstone, his voice a resonant thunder that rattled the window panes and the very souls of his congregation. He did not name Marin directly, not at first, but his allusions were unmistakable. He spoke of seeds of corruption and wolves in sheep's clothing, of those who turn their backs on God's mercy to consort with heathens and embrace the savage darkness. There are those, he boomed, his eyes sweeping over the pews, lingering on faces he knew harbored soft hearts or questioning minds, who would defy the natural order, who would spurn the guiding light of Christian fellowship for the shadowy embrace of the ungodly. They become a taint, a spiritual pestilence that can poison the well of an entire community. He painted the Lakota not merely as ignorant savages, but as instruments of a darker power, their ways a snare for the weak-willed. She has chosen the path of the idolater, the companion of those who know not the word. Can such a soul truly be saved while steeped in such blasphemy? Can a child nurtured in such a den of paganism escape the stain upon its immortal soul? His rhetoric escalated, weaving a narrative where Marin was not a desperate woman seeking refuge, but a willful apostate, her survival an affront, her continued existence with the Lakota a direct challenge to the moral fabric of Redemption Creek. This town, he thundered, his gaze fixing on the prominent figure of Jedediah Stone in the front pew. This beacon of civilization in a wild land cannot, must not, tolerate such a festering wound upon its honor, to allow one of our own to be lost to the wilderness, to be corrupted by savage ways, is to invite God's displeasure upon us all. It is an infection that must be excised before it spreads. The congregation shifted uneasily. Fear, thick and cloying, mingled with a perverse excitement. Widow Gable, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, bowed her head, a silent prayer of dissent lost in the rising tide of condemnation. Young Ruthie Bell, sitting beside her parents, felt a cold knot of confusion and fear. She remembered Marin's gentle eyes, the vulnerability beneath her quiet defiance. The preacher's words painted a monstrous picture, one that bore little resemblance to the woman she recalled, when she dared to whisper a hesitant question to her mother. But wasn't she just alone and scared? She received a sharp nudge and a hissed, "Hush, child. Listen to the preacher." The message was clear. Doubt was dangerous. Conformity was safety. Stone, for his part, played his role with practiced ease. He appeared suitably grave, nodding in agreement with Thorne's pronouncements. Publicly, he was the concerned citizen, the pillar of the community, shocked by this affront to their shared values. Privately, he was calculating. Thorne's moral crusade provided the perfect cover for his own, more pragmatic, Agenda. Later that week, in the saloon, Stone addressed a gathering of men, his tone a careful blend of civic concern and masculine resolve. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying easily over the clink of glasses. "Preacher Thorne has spoken eloquently of the spiritual peril, but there is also the matter of our town's reputation, our duty to a lost soul. He made sure to buy a generous round of drinks. It ain't fittin', a white woman, a Christian soul, living out there like some squaw, and the child, an innocent babe. It's our responsibility to see them returned to civilized ways." He hinted at the dangers, the unpredictability of the Lakota, subtly stoking the embers of fear and prejudice that always smoldered beneath the surface of frontier life. He spoke of protecting their own, a phrase that resonated deeply with men who felt the precariousness of their foothold in a vast and often unforgiving land. And so, the posse was formed. Some, like Thorne's most fervent acolytes, genuinely believed they were on a divine mission, their hearts aflame with righteous certainty. Others were Stone's ranch hands, their loyalty assured by steady pay and the implicit threat of unemployment. A few were rootless drifters, their participation bought with the promise of Stone's gold for their trouble and expenses. As he so generously put it, they armed themselves with rifles and pistols, their belts heavy with ammunition. Preacher Thorne, his face set in grim determination, insisted on accompanying them, his heavy, brass-clasped Bible held before him like a shield, a holy sanction for an enterprise born of fear, arrogance, and hypocrisy. He saw himself as a shepherd, venturing into the wilderness to reclaim a lost sheep, conveniently forgetting he'd been one of the wolves that had driven her out. Word of this armed, sanctimonious assembly preparing to ride out from Redemption Creek reached Hamaska's camp with the swiftness of a prairie fire. Lakota scouts, their eyes missing little, had observed the agitated comings and goings, the open display of weaponry, the grim set of the white men's faces. Tahamaska listened to the reports in the council lodge, his expression unreadable, the smoke from the central fire swirling around his strong, still features. Tushangjeka, ever impulsive, leapt to his feet. "They come to make war. They come to steal Wingyang Thawakoni and the boy. We must strike first, ambush them in the Broken Lands." Tahamaska let the ensuing murmurs rise and fall before he spoke, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight. "And if we strike first, Tushangeka, what then? We prove ourselves to be the savages they already believe us to be. We invite a greater conflict, one that could consume us all." He paused, his gaze sweeping over each face. "Wingyang Thawakoni is under our protection. Chaitin is a child of this camp. The great mystery guided her to our teepee when the storm spirits sought to claim her. We will not turn our backs on a gift from Wakan Tanka." His voice softened, yet lost none of its authority. "We will not seek battle. We will not stain our hands with blood if it can be avoided. But we are Lakota. We will stand firm. We will protect our own. We will meet their guns and their false words with the truth of our hearts and the strength of our spirit." A quiet resolve settled over the council. Preparations were made, not with the frantic energy of fear, but with the deliberate calm of a people who understood the currents of life and death. The camp was subtly fortified, lookouts posted at strategic points. The women and children were moved to the most sheltered teepees, and Chapoy, her ancient wisdom a steadying presence, brewed teas meant to soothe frayed nerves and strengthen resolve. Marin felt the shift, the underlying tension that hummed beneath the camp's daily rhythms. Chaiten, sensing his mother's disquiet, was restless. She found Tahmaska near the horse herd, his silhouette stark against the vast expanse of the prairie sky, his gaze fixed on the distant eastern horizon from whence the threat would emerge. "They are coming, aren't they?" Her voice was a low tremor, fear a cold knot in her stomach. "The men from Redemption Creek. For me, for my son." Tahmaska turned, his eyes, usually so full of quiet contemplation, now held a glint of tempered steel. "Yes, Wingyang Thawakoni. It appears the shadows of your past are long indeed." "What will happen?" she whispered, the question encompassing all her deepest fears. "You are Lakota now," he said, the simple declaration, a profound reassurance. "Chaiten is a son of our people. We do not surrender our family to those who mean them harm." He laid a hand gently on her arm. A brief, grounding touch. "Do not let fear consume your spirit. We will meet what comes, together." His quiet strength was a bulwark against the rising tide of her panic. She looked at this man, this leader whose compassion had been a lifeline in her darkest hour, and a fierce, protective love bloomed in her heart. For her son, for Tahmaska, for these proud, honorable people who had embraced her when her own kind had cast her out. The men from Redemption Creek were riding towards them, armed with their weapons, their gold, and their twisted justifications. But Wingyang Thawakoni knew, with a certainty that resonated to the core of her being, that she was no longer alone. She was home, and this home, this family, would not be easily sundered. The fragile peace had shattered. The storm they brought with them was now undeniable, and its arrival imminent. What did you think of today's story? If it made your day, drop a good in the comments. If it didn't hit the mark, just type 1. Got your own thoughts? I'd love to hear them below. And hey, don't forget to hit subscribe. It's free, and it really helps the channel grow. Thank you so much for being here. The prairie air, already taut with unspoken threats, vibrated with a new, dangerous intensity as Jedediah Stone's posse faced the silent, unyielding line of Lakota warriors. The sun beat down, reflecting off the polished barrels of rifles, the sweat trickling down nervous faces. Tahmaska, chief of the Pita Oyate, stood his ground, his presence a bulwark of calm dignity against the tide of aggression. "You have come far." Vashichu, Tahmaska's voice, even and resonant, sliced through the heavy silence. "State your purpose in the camp of the people." Preacher Thorn, his face a mottled canvas of righteous zeal and ill-suppressed fury, thrust his horse forward. His Bible, clutched like a talisman, was held aloft. "In the name of the Lord, God Almighty, we have come," he bellowed, his voice cracking with fervor. "For the woman, Marin, for her child. They are Christian souls, ensnared by pagan darkness. God's law demands their return to the sanctity of his fold." Jedediah Stone, ever the master of strained civility, waved a placating hand at Thorn, though his own eyes were cold chips of ice. "Tahmaska," he began, his tone dripping with false bonhomie. "No disrespect is intended. The woman, Marin, she is one of ours. The child, well, concerns have been raised. We are prepared to offer a substantial sum for your trouble in sheltering her." He signaled, and a man behind him hefted a saddlebag. The distinct clink of coin, a vulgar counterpoint to the prairie's natural sounds, for her safe passage back to her own kind. Tahmaska's gaze remained steady, but a shadow of contempt flickered within their depths. The woman you seek is now Wingyang Thawakoni. Her son is Chetan. They are of the Lakota. Their spirits are now intertwined with ours. They are not chattel to be bought or bartered. They will not be taken. Each word was deliberate, final. This is blasphemy, an abomination. Thorn's voice escalated into a near hysterical shriek. His control, always tenuous when his authority was challenged, was visibly fraying. She dwells in the shadow of sin. You all wallow in it. You shall know the fury of a righteous God. Preacher, Tahamaska interjected, his voice a sudden whip-crack of sound, still controlled, but now imbued with an undeniable authority that cut through Thorn's rant. Was it not your God, your people, who condemned her to the frozen plains, a babe in her womb, to face certain death? Your sacred book speaks of mercy. Yet where was yours? We, the heathen, as you call us, found her clinging to life's last thread. We offered her sanctuary, warmth, and the solace of our community. We helped bring her son into this world when you offered only damnation. He paused, his piercing gaze sweeping over the discomfited faces of the posses, settling on stone. And now you appear, not bowed with the shame of your cruelty, but armed with gold and guns, to wrench her from a life you yourselves deemed forfeit. What manner of honor is this? What God dictates such hypocrisy and calls it divine will? A restless shuffle went through Stone's men. This wasn't the simple retrieval mission they'd envisioned. This quiet, articulate condemnation from the Lakota chief unsettled them far more than any war cry could have, as if orchestrated by a power beyond them. The teepee flap behind Tahamaska parted. Marin stepped into the harsh sunlight. Wingyang Thawakonish. She was clad in a beautifully worked deerskin dress, her bearing regal, her dark hair plaited with beads that caught the light. Chetan, secure in his cradle board, slept soundly on her back. There was a profound serenity about her, a stark contrast to the haunted, desperate woman who had once sought refuge in Redemption Creek. She moved to stand beside Takamaskum, her eyes, clear and unwavering, meeting Jedediah Stone's directly. "We do not belong to you," she stated, her voice not loud, but carrying an undeniable resonance of conviction. "My son and I have found our home, our family. Here among a people who understand compassion and dignity. We have found peace. You hold no claim over us." Stone's carefully constructed composure began to crumble. A muscle throbbed in his clenched jaw. This poised, resolute woman was a stranger to him. Marin, he managed, his voice attempting a tone of reason that sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Be sensible. This is no existence for you. For the boy, consider his future. His future is here," Marin affirmed, her gaze unwavering. With his kin, with the Lakota. She then turned to Preacher Thorn, whose face was now a grotesque mask of apoplectic rage. "And regarding God's law, Preacher, I have witnessed more of His true mercy and grace within this heathen encampment than I ever did within the walls of your church." This was too much for Thorn. His fanaticism, fueled by public humiliation and the thwarting of his divine will, exploded. Blasphemy! He screamed, his voice hoarse, spittle flying from his lips. "She is utterly corrupted, a vessel of darkness, lost. We must seize them, for the salvation of their immortal souls. We must act now." With a wild cry, he fumbled beneath his coat, his hand emerging not with his Bible, but with a large, menacing Colt revolver. The Lord's work must be done. If you will not act, I will." Before anyone could react fully, he raised the pistol skyward and fired. The gunshot ripped through the tense silence. A deafening, shocking violation. Birds erupted from the nearby cottonwoods, and even the stoic ponies of the Lakota warriors sidestepped nervously. "Smite the heathens," Thorn raved, his eyes rolling with a terrifying light as he tried to aim the pistol now towards the Lakota. "Cleanse this land of their filth. Are you men of God or cowering curs?" The Lakota warriors, though startled by the sudden shot, did not break ranks. Their hands moved instinctively to their own weapons. Bows, lances, a few older trade rifles, their expressions hardening into grim readiness. Tahamaska stood like granite, his eyes now blazing with a cold fire, a silent warning. The air crackled, thick with the imminent promise of bloodshed. Marin gasped, her body instinctively shielding Chiton, her heart pounding with a terror that was not for herself, but for the people who had become her sanctuary. It was Miller, the burly ranch hand from Stone's posse, his face ashen, who lunged first, not at the Lakota, but at Thorn. "Preacher, no!" he roared, grabbing for the gun. Another of Stone's men, equally horrified at the prospect of a massacre, joined him. "Have you gone mad?" Thorn, Stone himself, bellowed, his face contorted with fury, not at the Lakota, but at his supposed spiritual advisor. "I'll not have a bloodbath on my hands because of your lunacy." A desperate, clumsy struggle ensued. Thorn, endowed with the surprising strength of the truly fanatical, fought like a cornered bobcat, still screaming about God's vengeance and damnation. But Miller and the other man, their fear of an Indian war outweighing any lingering respect for the preacher, managed to wrestle the revolver from his grasp. "He's lost his mind," Miller panted, shoving the gun into his own belt and backing away from the still struggling Thorn, who was now being forcibly restrained by two more of Stone's increasingly mutinous men. "We came to talk. Maybe take 'em back, not to get slaughtered." The fragile pretense of Stone's mission lay shattered. The posse was visibly divided. Some men looking utterly terrified, others disgusted by Thorn's unhinged display. Over the rise, the small group of townsfolk from Redemption Creek, including a wide-eyed Ruthie Bell and a grim-faced Widow Gable, had witnessed the entire horrifying spectacle. Thorn's insane rage, the gunshot, the near eruption of violence. Their faces reflected shock and a dawning, sickening understanding of the true nature of the men leading their town. Jedediah Suntons, his face a mask of cold fury and profound humiliation, knew this was an unmitigated disaster. He shot a venomous glare at the struggling, now somewhat subdued, Preacher Thorn. He had been outmaneuvered, outdignified, and nearly dragged into a fatal conflict by a madman. "Withdraw," he bit out, the order like stones in his mouth. Now, the retreat was ignominious under the unwavering, silent scrutiny of the Lakota warriors, and the equally silent, accusing stares of their fellow townsfolk. Stone's posse turned their horses. Preacher Thorn, still muttering dark prophecies and curses, was virtually dragged along, a fallen prophet, his authority in tatters. As they passed the cluster of onlookers, Marin's gaze found Ruthie Bell. The young woman's face was etched with horror and a deep, unspoken shame for her town, for her preacher. Marin, holding Chiton close, offered a slow, deliberate nod. It was not a nod of triumph, but one of profound sorrow, of shared humanity, and perhaps a nascent forgiveness for those like Ruthie. Caught in the currents of others' malice, Ruthie felt that nod like a physical touch, a moment of connection that irrevocably shifted her understanding of good and evil, of courage and hypocrisy. The Lakota stood, a silent, powerful tableau, until the last of the riders had vanished over the prairie horizon, leaving behind only the scent of dust and the lingering echo of a single, foolish gunshot. Tahimaaska finally turned, his eyes meeting Marin's. A deep, unspoken understanding flowed between them. The immediate danger had passed, not through violence, but through the steadfast courage of a people who knew their worth, and the unraveling of an enemy from within. Yet, the bitter taste of the encounter remained. The shame that Jedediah Stone and Preacher Thorne carried back to Redemption Creek was a potent poison, and such poisons had a way of breeding an even more dangerous resolve. The years that followed the humiliating retreat of Stone's posse were like the slow, steady current of a wide river, carrying Marin and young Chayton forward into a life of unexpected grace. The seasons turned, painting the prairie in their ever-changing palette, the vibrant greens of spring melting into the sun-baked golds of summer, then the russet and umber hues of autumn giving way to the stark, cleansing white of winter. With each turning, Marin felt herself more deeply rooted, her spirit intertwined with the ancient rhythms of the Lakota way. Wingyang Thawakoni, she had grown into her name, the syllables a quiet song of resilience within her. She learned the intricate art of quill work from the patient grandmothers. Her fingers, once raw from harsh labor in a world that had offered her little kindness, now moved with a newfound deftness, weaving beauty and story into soft deerskin. She learned to read the subtle language of the land alongside Chapoadoi, identifying the healing herbs that grew in hidden sun-dappled glades or clung to rocky outcrops, understanding their sacred properties and the precise moment of their readiness. She never ventured on the great buffalo hunts. That was the men's sacred duty, but she learned the communal work of preparing the meat that sustained them, the careful curing of hides that clothed and sheltered them, her contributions woven into the vital fabric of the tribe's existence. Hertipi, always neat and welcoming, was a haven of warmth, and Chaitan's laughter, a frequent, joyous melody within its circular embrace, was a testament to the security he felt. He was a child of two worlds, his mother's gentle strength and the wild, free spirit of the prairie. Yet he was wholly of one heart, the Lakota heart, nurtured by the profound wisdom of the people. He knew his mother's story, not as a whispered tale of shame, but as a narrative of courage and survival, recounted with respect by the elders around the flickering glow of the communal fires. He was loved, cherished, a bright, inquisitive spark in the life of the tribe. News from Redemption Creek, when it did arrive, was like a distant, fading echo. It drifted in with itinerant traders or was pieced together from the observations of Lakota scouts who ranged far. The town's self-proclaimed prestige, once the bedrock of its leading citizens' arrogance, had begun to crack and crumble. Preacher Thorne's unhinged, violent outburst at the Lakota camp, witnessed by some of his own flock, had planted seeds of doubt that time had nurtured into a thorny thicket of disillusionment. His sermons, though still occasionally peppered with the fire of old, now often carried a hollow, desperate ring, whispers questioning his moral compass, his very sanity, once unthinkable, now circulated with a quiet but persistent boldness. Jedediah Stone's dominion, too, had visibly diminished. His blatant cowardice and public humiliation before Tahimaaska's steadfast dignity had irrevocably stripped away his veneer of indomitable power. Men who had once eagerly sought his favor now offered only a cool, measuring gaze. Redemption Creek, it was murmured, was a town slowly souring, its wellspring of communal trust poisoned by the bitter dregs of its own hypocrisy. 1 year, just as the first tentative signs of spring had begun to whisper across the land, a false promise of warmth after a long, hard winter, the sky turned a malevolent, bruised purple, an unseasonable blizzard, a true Thien Tai of terrifying ferocity, descended upon the plains. It raged for days, a howling white demon that obliterated the landscape, burying the camp under immense drifts, making movement beyond the confines of the tipis nearly impossible. The cold was a living thing, seeping through the thickest buffalo robes, chilling families to the bone. Wood supplies, thought ample for a normal winter's end, dwindled at an alarming rate. Hunting became a desperate, life-threatening gamble in the blinding, shrieking whiteness. Then, as the blizzard finally exhausted its fury, leaving behind a world entombed and eerily silent, the sickness began. Perhaps it was the prolonged exposure to the damp cold, or the unavoidable contamination of snowmelt water, or simply the weakened state of bodies pushed beyond their endurance. It started subtly, a dry cough here, a child's unusual lethargy there, but it soon blossomed into a terrifying scourge, a lung fever that spread with terrifying speed from one lodge to another. A burning heat consumed its victims, followed by racking coughs that tore at their chests, each breath a painful, rasping struggle. The camp, usually vibrant with activity and laughter, grew quiet, punctuated only by the sounds of suffering and the low, mournful chants of worried families. Fear, a cold and unwelcome guest, settled heavily in every teepee. The Thiet High, the damage, was not just physical, it was a blow to the community's spirit. The most vulnerable, the very young and the revered elders, were hit hardest. Some bright flames of life, cherished members of the tribe, were extinguished too soon, leaving an ache in the collective heart of the people. Chapoy, her wise face etched with worry and exhaustion, worked tirelessly. She drew upon generations of ancestral knowledge, her skilled hands preparing poultices of mashed roots, brewing infusions from bitter barks, her voice a constant, soothing presence as she moved from one stricken family to another. Yet, this particular affliction was relentless, its grip tenacious. There were moments when even her profound faith in the old ways seemed to flicker in the face of such widespread suffering. Marin, watching the relentless march of the illness, felt a familiar cold dread mix with a rising sense of urgency. She had seen illnesses like this before, in the crowded, unsanitary fringes of the white settlements she had passed through in her younger, more desperate years. She remembered the remedies her own grandmother, a woman of unconventional wisdom, had relied upon, remedies that sometimes blended old European folk medicine with practical frontier knowledge. One particularly grim night, as they sat together by the low fire in Chapoy's teepees, the air thick with the scent of medicinal herbs and the muted sounds of coughing from nearby lodges, Marin spoke, her voice hesitant but clear. "Chapoy," she began, "forgive me if I overstep, but this lung fever, it reminds me of something my grandmother used to fight. She would make a strong steam from boiled willow bark for the fever and the leaves of the mullein plant, if it could be found, to open the chest and ease the breath. She also recalled certain tinctures and powders she still possessed in her small, carefully guarded bundle from her past, remnants of a world she had left behind, but whose knowledge might now prove vital. Chapoy, her spirit bowed by fatigue, but her mind ever receptive to wisdom, regardless of its source, listened with profound attention. There was no pride in her, only a deep, abiding desire to heal her people. Tell me more. Wingyang Tawakone, she urged, her dark eyes fixed on Marin's. Our ways are strong, but the great mystery sometimes provides healing through unexpected channels. And so, they began to work as one, their hands and hearts united. Marin described how to create concentrated steam inhalations, rigging makeshift tents over bowls of boiling herbal infusions. They carefully combined Chapoy's potent Lakota remedies with some of Marin's hoarded supplies, a precious bit of quinine for the worst fevers, a salve that eased the raw chafing from constant coughing. They worked day and night, their own health a secondary concern, moving like tireless spirits through the stricken camp. Marin's presence, her quiet competence, her gentle touch, brought comfort not only to the sick, but also to their distraught families. They saw not a white woman, an outsider, but Wingyang Thawakone, the woman who survives. Now fighting for their survival, there were heartbreaking losses, moments when their combined efforts were not enough, when a beloved elder or a cherished child slipped away into the spirit world despite their desperate ministrations. Each loss was a fresh wound, but there were also small, precious victories. A child's fever finally breaking after days of relentless burning. An old warrior, his breathing ragged and shallow, beginning to draw easier, deeper breaths. The first, weak smile from a young mother who had been too ill to recognize her own babe. These were the moments that refueled their weary spirits, that strengthened their resolve. Slowly, painstakingly, the lung fever's cruel grip began to loosen. The coughing subsided, the fevers cooled, and the pervasive shadow of fear began to lift from the camp, replaced by a fragile, hard-won hope. When the last vestiges of the sickness had finally passed, leaving the community battered but not broken, a profound shift had occurred. Marin was no longer simply an adopted member of the tribe. She was a cherished daughter, a sister, a healer whose wisdom, blended with Chapoy's, had helped pull them back from the brink. The ordeal had forged an unbreakable bond, proving that compassion and the will to heal knew no boundaries of race or traditions. Her place in the circle was now indelible, cemented not by formal adoption, but by shared struggle and selfless service. The bond between Marin and Tahamaska, too, had deepened through this shared trial. He had watched her, tireless and brave, moving through the camp like a healing spirit, her quiet strength a comfort to all. His respect for her, already profound, had transformed into a deep, abiding admiration and a tender affection that resonated in the quiet glances they exchanged, in the comfortable silences they shared. One soft summer evening, long after the scars of that terrible spring had begun to fade into memory, as the moon cast its benevolent silver light across the sleeping prairie, Tahamaska came to Marin's tipi. He did not speak of the turbulent passions of youth, for theirs was a connection that had matured slowly, like a great river finding its inevitable course to the sea. "Wingyang Tawakone," he said, his voice a low, gentle rumble that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the earth. "Your spirit has long been a part of our spirit. Your son, Shaitan, is a beloved son of our people. It would bring great honor to my heart and to the heart of our community. If you would consent to share my fire, if our paths, which have run so closely alongside each other, could now formally become one, tears, bright and warm, welled in Marin's eyes. They were not tears of sorrow or past pain, but of a profound, almost overwhelming joy and a sense of homecoming that settled deep within her soul. This was not a proposal born of mere convenience or lonely duty, but a sacred invitation to a life shared in complete partnership, offered with the deepest dignity and a quiet, powerful affection. Their joining was not marked by the loud fanfare of the white world, but by a serene and beautiful ceremony, steeped in the ancient traditions of the Lakota. Beneath the vast, star-dusted canvas of the night sky, surrounded by the loving embrace of the community that had truly become her family, they shared the breath of life through the sacred pipe, their vows unspoken yet profoundly understood by every heart present. Chapoy, her face radiant, offered a blessing, her voice a soft, melodious chant that called upon the spirits of the earth, the sky, and the four sacred directions to look kindly upon their union. It was more than a marriage. It was a sacred weaving together of two lives, two spirits, into a single, resilient cord, blessed by the people and the ancient land itself. Marin never forgot the shadows of her past, the bitter taste of Jedediah's betrayal, the chilling cruelty of Redemption Creek's judgment, the raw ache of abandonment. But these memories, once jagged shards that threatened to pierce her peace, had lost their power to inflict pain. They were now but part of the intricate tapestry of her life, the dark threads that served only to highlight the brilliance of the golden ones. The suffering had been a fierce crucible, forging her into the woman she was now. Wingyang Thawakoni, Siremt, strong, and at long last, unequivocally free. Years melted into the stream of time. One cool autumn evening, as the setting sun bled colors of fire and amethyst across the western horizon, Marin sat contentedly before her teepot. The air was crisp with the promise of coming frost, scented with wood smoke and the rich aroma of roasting meat. She watched her son, Chaitan. He was a young man now, standing tall and straight as a lodgepole pine, his movements imbued with an easy grace. In his eyes, one could see the keen intelligence and gentle wisdom inherited from his mother, seamlessly blended with the quiet strength and profound integrity of Tahamaska, the man who had been more of a father to him than any blood tie could have made. In Chaitan's hands, he held a smoothed piece of buffalo hide. With a charred willow stick, he carefully formed symbols upon its surface. On one portion of the hide, he practiced the flowing script of the English alphabet, the legacy of his mother's first world. On another, with equal concentration, he sketched the ancient pictographs of the Lakota, symbols that pulsed with the history and sacred stories of the people. He moved between these two forms of language, these two expressions of human thought, with a natural, unforced fluency. He was a living bridge, a testament to the possibility of harmony between worlds. Marin watched him, a soft, knowing smile gracing her lips. This, she understood with a clarity that warmed her to her very soul, was the true and lasting legacy, not the festering bitterness of old wounds, but the bright, hopeful promise of a future where understanding could indeed overcome hatred, where disparate worlds might meet. Not in the clash of ignorance and fear, but in the shared, universal language of the human heart. She had found her sanctuary, her truest home, not in a place circumscribed by lines drawn on a surveyor's map or dictated by the accident of her birth, but within the expansive, accepting heart of a people who had shown her the deepest meaning of kinship. Here, among the Lakota, beneath the benevolent gaze of the great, silent sky, Wingyang Thawakoni, the woman who survives, was profoundly and irrevocably at peace. Akujul, what do y'all think? Did Marin find justice? Or just a different kind of exile? Would you trust strangers more than your own blood if they left you to die? I'd love to hear your take. Drop a comment below and let's talk about it. And if stories like this speak to something deep in your gut about honor, grit, and second chances, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next ride through the wild heart of the frontier.